Let's get salty!
Everyone, Zeddy here again today with a brand new video, and with the latest patch in Hearthstone, there has been a lot of talk about buffs, as we saw 25 cards getting buffed in Hearthstone, and well, it really hasn't changed much yet, and a lot of people are pretty upset, very vocal about it, whether on social media, comments on my videos, that the meta has barely changed, and I kind of wanted to talk about the real truth about buffs, their role in Hearthstone, and how they are a good, honestly, a very good thing, but the way they're being used right now is something that just doesn't seem to be working. And before we get into all that, I just want to thank everybody. We got pretty close to 69,420 odd. Yes, this is my birthday. I'm turning 87 years old. I'm that old now. It's actually 38. But myself and douchebag Zeddy appreciate all of you. Also, we'll be doing a birthday stream over at Twitch starting at 4 p.m. Pacific. Be hanging out, having fun. Nova will be there. So come hang out with me, douchebag Zeddy, all of that over at twitch.tv/Zeddy. So yes, this patch had like an insane amount of buffs, but they don't seem to be moving the needle basically at all yet. This was posted on the Hearthstone subreddit, the top decks, at least 1,600 game sample size so far, and yeah, it's kind of a lot of what we saw beforehand, right? Shadow Priest, Frost DK, Pure Paladin, Druid, Outcast Demon Hunter, like all decks that were dominant beforehand and all of that, and we don't really see any new threats emerging. Even taking a look at HS Replay Top 1000 Legend, it's a lot of Deathlight, a lot of Demon Hunter. Control Priest might actually be a bit playable, but overall, not seeing a ton where you have like very fringe sample sizes on like Fatigue and Porlock. Burn Mage, kind of like 50-ish%, but overall, none of the new cards are really thriving, right? It's still the old stuff. The buffs that were really focused, you know, they're really trying to make Warrior, Naga Mage, Overload Shaman are just still an absolute dumpster fire right now, as the buffs haven't really done it. But there's a reason for that, and that's the shocking truth about buffs and all, is that they are good for the game. They typically almost always are good for the game, but not in the way of addressing meta changes in the short term. You look at like the history of buffs in Hearthstone, the first time there was ever like mass buffs, like they were super rare. I don't know if there was ever buffs before this event. It was during the rise of the mech event, and they buffed a bunch of cards. And ironically, most of them didn't do a lot. Take a look at a lot of these cards, like Gloop Sprayer didn't do much, Mulch Muncher did see play, Intriguant Druid, Necromancer was like a fringe greed option in Mech Hunter, sorry. Boomzuka didn't work, unexpected results, but the big one, right? Luna's Pocket Galaxy is the one we all talk about with buffs, where it outright broke the game. Another example being Edwin for Rogue going to 3 mana. There have been examples of it breaking the game, right? And that's bad. Like, you don't want that, and the devs have really been careful not to do that outside of, I guess, Edwin. A lot of these buffs are irrelevant, but there are the good buffs. There are the good buffs, like a Crystology became a mainstay. Glowstone Technician eventually saw play later in Hand Buff Paladin. Extra Arms saw play later in Inner Fire Priest. And well, I guess Stormbringer ended up seeing a bit of play. Thunderhead was already a playable card. It was one of those weird ones that got buffed. Spear Bomb eventually saw play in like Demon Seed Warlock, and the Warrior buffs, as always, did absolutely nothing. But what you can hear, there's a kind of a trend with it with buffs, is that they are typically good, but not until later. Well, I'm going to take a look at Ashes of Outland, an expansion where Paladin was just terrible. Nobody wanted to play Paladin. It wasn't good. It was getting the same complaints Warrior we're getting right now. Like, we got these crappy Libram cards. This was a 2-mana 2/3 at the time, and I believe Libram of Justice was 6 mana. It's terrible. Libram Paladin's terrible. Buff it. What are you doing? And then they did. They buffed a bunch of Libram cards. They made Aldor Attendant 1 mana. They made Libram of Justice 5 mana. And, you know, people complained a lot about Libram Paladin being good, but it wasn't after the buffs. It wasn't until Skullman's Academy came along, and you had First Day of School, which was 0 mana. It got nerfed. You had Hayabusa Laura, which got nerfed to 5 mana at one point. You had cards like Devout Pupil and Barov. You had Penflinger and Broomstick in the neutral set. All of a sudden, the support was there, and these cards that were underwhelming, underperforming, started doing really well. Another example is you look at Shaman, they were struggling immensely during Forge of the Barons. Like, you gotta buff Shaman, it's useless, it's terrible. And they buffed a bunch of cards, including like Lilypad Lurker. There was some other cards as well, but it still remained bad. Elemental Shaman wasn't good. And then the mini set came around and they got some support. Primal Dungeoneer. And then Granite Forgeboard came out the next set, as well as like Canal Slogger and all that. And all of a sudden it was really good. And it was like, man, that card's too good now. It's like the thing about buffs and the thing about Hearthstone decks in general, the card quality can only be so good. The support needs to be there for the deck to thrive. So right now, when we're looking at Warrior, like the Rifts, they're not that bad of cards anymore, right? They're buffed and all of that. They're playable. Hell, getting a Bridge Rift out and then playing like Verse Rift right away is pretty darn good, but that's it. It's just pretty darn good. The support for all of Warrior to win games isn't there. These are all solid cards, but you're not seeing basically Warrior emerging as this top threat. The only competitive Warrior deck is in Rage Warrior because it's got a lot of support. It's got a lot of tools. Same goes with Shaman. There's got a bunch of Overload cards buffed. Lightning Storm's a pretty good card now. Jazz Base is a pretty good card. Altered Core, to argue, is just insane, right? 2-minute deal 6 lifesteal in those situations, but the way to win the games isn't there. The support isn't there. For the most part, buffs are really integral for decks to become better in the long term. Unless you're breaking the game with the Luna's Pocket Galaxy, with an Edwin, buffs aren't going to move the needle. They're not gonna all of a sudden usurp the top decks and start making it, you know, you don't just face Deathlight every game and Demon Hunter every game. Those type of changes don't happen unless cards are significantly nerfed. That's just the way it's always been. The biggest meta changes outside of very niche exceptions in Hearthstone have always been centered around nerfs, around dialing power level back to allow another deck to catch up that is on that verge. And right now we're just not seeing those big nerfs happening. And I think one of the best examples of how effective nerfs can be is looking at Death Knight. Wasn't that long ago where Death Knight wasn't a good class. When it launched, it was sub 50%. And don't you remember, they buffed a bunch of cards to try and help the situation. Blightfang got buffed, Meat Grinder got buffed, Bone Guard Commander got buffed, Blood Tap got buffed, Holy Frenzy, Malignant Horror, Corpse Bride, Battlefield Necromancer, one of the relevant buffs that actually does see play, Obliterate, Ymir Deathbringer, Rhyme Sculptor, and Stitch Shine. Did that make the difference for Death Knight? No, it didn't. What made the difference for Death Knight was Rogue, which was too good at the time, got a bunch of nerfs. Its location got nerfed twice. Draka got nerfed. It let other decks breathe, while Podnull in particular getting nerfed. And all of a sudden, Death Knight started to thrive because the outliers got dialed back, not because of buffs. You see most of the Death Knight cards don't even see play that got buffed. And I don't even need to go through the Warrior cards, of which in the last half year, we have seen roughly like, I believe 10 to 12 cards getting buffed. And Warrior still is basically in an unplayable state outside of like 50% win rate within a Rage Warrior. Don't even try and play like a Control Warrior deck. Buffs set the foundation for later, but if you want real change, you need real nerfs. And right now, I just feel like it's lacking, and I don't know why that is. And I would like to see them really start getting back to nerfing outliers to let other decks and other classes breathe, like we've done throughout the history of Hearthstone. Because yes, buffs are good for the game, but not for the purpose of really spicing up the meta. It just doesn't work unless it's a disaster like Luna's Pocket Galaxy. So let me know what you think in the comments below about buffs and all of that. And tune in later today. I will finally be having my achievement guide. Yes, my birthday. I'm putting out 2 videos. That's how I celebrate. But yes, I have the achievement guide coming out later today, and the schedule will resume tomorrow as usual. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Have a great day and stay salty, my friends.